Merry readers, come cozy in. Let the story time begin with Robin and the Marys.
Merry readers, today is September 26th, and that means that it is time for chapters 9 and 10 of A Discovery of Witches. As I've done before on double chapter days, I'm going to be splitting this video into two parts. So this one will be chapter 9, and then the next one will be chapter 10. This chapter picks up after Diana and Matthew have a fight. I also just want to say that I'm a little under the weather today, so I've written out some more notes about my summary instead of just trying to remember everything. So this video might be a little bit shorter and a little bit less in-depth than some of my other ones, but I really wanted to make sure I still got these videos out on time. So just bear with me if you see me reading off of my notes, that's why. I've written very concise summaries for both chapters, and I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything. So chapter 9 starts off with Matthew retreating after the rough ending to their night of yoga. After he drops Diana off, he decides to go up to Scotland, and so the chapter picks up with him driving up to Scotland. And when he gets there, he arrives in a hunting lodge, and it belongs to one of his good friends, Hamish Osborne, who is a financial advisor for many presidents and royalty, and he's made tremendous wealth by advising people of nobility and political figures and important celebrities on how to double their wealth, and by doing so he has made himself an incredible fortune. So he bought a hunting lodge up in the Scottish Highlands. Hamish is originally from Glasgow, and we learn that he and Matthew met at Oxford, and we very quickly learn that he's also a demon. So Matthew says that most demons are not able to make much of their lives because they can't focus long enough. Creativity is a big trademark of many demons, and he says that unfortunately that leads many of them down the road of using drugs and being depressed, but Hamish was able to turn that creativity into being creative with numbers, and he was able to make a fortune off of his skills of doing mathematics. So when Matthew arrives, he tells Hamish that he's there to hunt, but Hamish can actually see right through him because they're such good friends, and so Hamish probes a little bit. Matthew says that he really wants to hunt, and Hamish can see right through him and knows that something must be up at Oxford. So he has planned a whole evening and next day to try to get Matthew out of this funk that he's in. So he invites Matthew in for some drinks, and once Matthew is sitting there sipping on wine and they've been hanging out for a little bit, Matthew starts to talk about how there was a witch, and he just divulges a little bit, but Hamish knows that he'll need to do a little bit more to get Matthew to really open up about this, but he has a feeling that whatever is going on in Oxford is not what's really bothering Matthew, because his senses are just really heightened and he can tell that his friend is interested in something. So the next day, Matthew wakes up and he tells Hamish, "Oh, I will go hunting on my own." And Hamish says, "Absolutely not. I will go with you. We're not hunting, we're stalking." And so they go off and they stalk, and Matthew opens up a little bit more about what's going on. And by the time they get home for dinner, Matthew has told Hamish pretty much everything about how there is the manuscript, Ashmole 782, and Diana, and everything. And Hamish ends up calling Matthew out and saying to him, "I think that you're actually hunting her because you're interested in her." And Matthew is relieved that this is out in the open because he realized it too. He's feeling too protective over her. And then Matthew opens up about two other women that he had been interested in the past who he had accidentally killed. And so Hamish tells him that he's much stronger now. He can't let these previous deaths scare him off of finding someone that he's actually interested in, and that if Diana is showing interest back, he should go for it, and that he's sure that everything in Oxford will work itself out. So Hamish organizes a stalking trip, and then over dinner, billiards, wine, and finally a chess match, he corners Matthew into confessing. He asks, "Do you want Diana for Ashmole 782? or for her magic, and Matthew explodes at this point. He doesn't want her for her power or for research. What he wants is far more dangerous, and so he goes into this a little bit more, and Hamish presses, and Matthew admits that he wants Diana for herself. Hamish warns him, then you're hunting her, not for food, but for lust. And that word lust unleashes Matthew's darkest memories. He confesses that centuries ago, in the heat of passion, he lost control with a woman named Cecilia. He fed on her, couldn't stop, and in his desperation to save her, turned her into a vampire. But Cecilia despised her life so much that she walked into a burning building and ended it. Later, about 100 years ago, there was also a woman named Eleanor, another woman destroyed by Matthew's hunger and lack of restraint. Both women died because of him. So these revelations were definitely hard, and Hamish could see how much they weigh on Matthew, and that these memories haunt him, and now he fears history repeating itself with Diana. Their talk broadens about how vampires are the only species who know that they are what they are instantly, while witches and especially demons must wait for their traits to show, often without family ties. They discuss the Westminster murders, and Matthew reveals that his deeper fear is actually that creatures are dying out, and this urgency, the need to understand origins and survival, is why Ashmole 782 matters so much to him. So this chapter ends with Matthew feeling a lot better after having his hunt and having a good meal, because Hamish makes sure that he eats enough and that he gets all of this off his chest. So it's a very good chapter, and we learn a lot more about Matthew and some of his past. So for the questions for this chapter, the setting is really just Matthew in his car and then the hunting lodge up in Scotland. Raw landscape for stalking deer, mirroring Matthew's predatory instincts. And then there's the inside of the actual hunting lodge with the billiards and chess and wine, which are symbols of civility, strategy, and confession. So this chapter has a lot of symbols in its setting, which I really enjoyed. The characters that we get to know about, it's Matthew, of course, we get to know more about him, and then Hamish, and then we get to hear about Eleanor and Cecilia, who were past lovers of Matthew, who came to an untimely death. The history and academic Easter eggs. Hamish's history as a financial advisor ties supernatural influence into real-world power, and chess as an intellectual metaphor for manipulation and revelation. Magic Watch. There's not really any spells or magic in this, but biology and philosophy dominate this chapter, the differences in how species discover what they are, and the looming extinction threat. Ashmole 782 is referenced again and reframed as not just knowledge but survival. The mood and tone. This is a confessional chapter. Haunted, brutally honest, very raw chapter. Tensions between predatory instincts and civil veneer. Wine, cheese, and ghosts of the past lovers are all seen in this chapter. The symbols and details of this chapter, it's chess, it's learning about past lovers with Cecilia and Eleanor, hunting and stalking, and how that's something that Matthew needs to do for himself as self-care, as well as just to survive. Wine, of course, which helps loosen the restraints that Matthew is feeling around sharing with his friend. Romance Watch. Matthew admits in this chapter that he wants Diana not just for her magic, and actually not for her magic at all, and not for Ashmole 782, but just for her. He wants her for her. But his confession of Cecilia and Eleanor makes the romance terrifying. Can he ever want her without destroying her? And that's really the question that he's battling with inside himself. Food and drink in this chapter. We have wine, and we hear a lot about Hamish's preference for scotch and whiskey. Loosening lips, unmasking the predator behind the scholar, and just it's a very raw chapter, and the food and drink in this chapter mirror that really well. Overall vibe and chapter strength of this one. This is one of the most important Matthew POV chapters, I would say. It strips him bare. We get a really raw side of him, showing his guilt, lust, and haunted past. And I think that that alone makes this a really strong chapter. Foreshadowing. Cecilia's death in fire and Eleanor's tragic end foreshadow the dangers that Diana faces if Matthew loses control. Hamish's blunt warning, "You're hunting her," frames the predatory prey romance that drives the series. And then, of course, there's the extinction that is happening of the races of creatures and just how prevalent this must be in Matthew's mind. And I would imagine how this will become more and more important as the series goes on. So the discussion question I'll leave you for this chapter is, do Matthew's confessions about Cecilia and Eleanor make you trust him less? Or do they prove he's finally being honest about how dangerous his love can truly be? And I'd just love to hear a little bit more about that in the comments and anything else you may have questions about or would like to discuss. And I will see you very soon in the next video for chapter 10. Bye!
So many readers, close your eyes. Let the stories lift and rise. Till next time, when lights will gleam